Our first speaker is Dr. Kirk Elliott. Kirk has a Ph.D. in public policy and economics. He did his dissertation on inflation. He also holds a Ph.D. in theology, or a Th.D. He serves on Dr. James Dobson's board of directors. He also serves on Patrick Henry College Board and WorldNet Daily. He's been fighting the fight for religious freedom and economic freedom for over 2 decades. He too is an author, an entrepreneur, the founder of Sovereign Advisors, and a proud husband and father of 2 beautiful children, of which he and his spouse have homeschooled. The title of Kirk's talk is very, very important and very pertinent to what's occurring in this nation right now, on the brink of losing our system. Kirk is going to address this. The title of Kirk's talk is Capitalism versus Socialism and the 2020 election. Please welcome my good friend for over 10 years and brother in this battle, Dr. Kirk Elliott.
It's really good to be with you. This thick Florida air is messed up with my throat. It's like, where's my voice? It's like breathing soup down here. But I live in a mile high and in Denver, and it really is great to be here. So I was just told by somebody that this picture makes me look really mean. So, kind of a funny story. We were visiting a church and recently, and my daughter was there, and there were these 3 ladies at the front, and they said, and I went outside and I was talking to some guys, and they didn't know that my daughter was there, these 3 ladies, and so they were saying, "See that guy out there? That big, mean-looking one?" My daughter says, "Yeah." They said, "Well, he's actually really nice." And so she didn't say anything. I said, "Okay, now you're doomed, because if you ever go back to that church, they're going to know that you didn't fess up." So anyways, not as mean as that picture looks. But I've got an important topic today, and it's capitalism versus socialism in the 2020 election. And you know, we don't really want to mince words. What is socialism? Communism. Yeah, it's Marxist-Leninism. It's communism. It is what it is, and everybody tries to soften it and make it sound nice and fluffy, and everybody's equal, and we want everybody to be the same. And as we're going to get into it, you'll see what they really want. They want everybody to be equally poor. Because that's what socialism is really all about. So before we get into that, you know, the 2020 election, what does that mean? It means that people are going to vote. So when people vote, they vote based on a belief system of who they are. So we need to know who we are, and conversely, we need to know who they are. Right? And so once you understand who we are and once we understand who they are, now we can really start to make a difference and an impact. And understanding why they think the way that they do, why we think the way that we do, because once we can posture our arguments in a good way, hopefully by the end of this, we're not just going to have influence, but we'll have impact. You know, it's not good enough to just have influence, because you have to have impact. It's like we do a lot of inner city work in downtown Denver. My family goes into the projects twice a month, and we're just loving on the little kids and showing them that they have value, showing them that they're worth something, showing them that God created them special. It doesn't matter that their mom might be a prostitute, their dad's in the slammer for something, who knows what. I mean, this is life in the inner city a lot of times. And so we're going into, well, my kids can't because they're not old enough, but I go into the jails every Friday, and I'm playing basketball with the inmates, having devotions with them, just loving on them. And it's like, you know what? It was kind of scary at first. It really was. But you get used to it, because they're just people. They're just people. And I tell them all the time, you know, these inmates, it's like, you know what? I'm not that different than you are. I'm one really bad decision away from being where you are. All of us are one bad decision away from being where they are. So, when we vote, we're one bad decision away from being something really nasty, right? So we have to keep this all into perspective. The people are people. They've gone through different circumstances in life, and that shapes who they are. So let's talk real quickly about your theory of the world, who you are and who they are. And then we're going to get into some kind of interesting quotes from a lot of the candidates on the left. We're going to get into some stories that I have from being at the inauguration with Trump. And it's going to be hopefully, we'll end with some solutions. We'll end with some concrete blueprints and strategies to move forward and make sure that we win this election. It's an important one. Every time there's an election, we always say, this is the most important one of our lifetime. Truly, this one is the most important one of our lifetime. And so, everything that I'm talking about today is really what it could be like. But I know what the other speakers are going to be talking about today. And when John comes up to talk, it's going to be about what it will be like. Because he's talking about what Trump is doing for our country and what's happening. So don't take this one as like gloom and doom, and it's like, we'll try to make it a little bit fun, but remember, this is what America could be like. And what John is talking about with Trump's policies, what America will be like. So how you view the world impacts how you make choices. So this is why it's important to become grounded in what you believe and why you believe it. So simply put, a worldview is simply just a theory of the world, and it's a mental model of reality. So what comprises a worldview? Well, you've got philosophy, theology, ethics, biology, psychology, sociology, law, politics, economics, and history. You combine all of those into your brain. It does become kind of soupy sometimes, but that is your worldview. All of us have different opinions and facts on these different subjects, and that makes up your worldview. So an old friend of mine, David Noble, he had Summit Ministries. It's an amazing Christian worldview campus in Colorado Springs where they teach kids, in high school and prior to going into college, what they should believe. So when they go into college, they don't lose their faith. Like 80% of the kids that go to college do. So it's like, if you know what you believe, and this is why it's important for us as we vote. If we know what we believe, we're not going to lose what we've worked our whole life to accomplish, right? So basically these worldviews can be boiled down into 6 different categories. Christianity, Islam, secular humanism, Marxist-Leninism, cosmic humanism, and postmodernism. So that's the fancy way of saying that there's 6 different ways. I want to distill it down even more and say there's 2. There's God's way and everything else. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So let's move on a little bit and start defining some terms. So what is capitalism? So capitalism is simply this, and you all are capitalists in this room. I pretty much guarantee it. And as I'm reading this off, you're going to say, yeah, that's me. That's what I believe. And so you're already on the right path to knowing what you believe. So it's an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and the operation for profit. It means that if you work hard and you buy something, you should have the right to control it and do whatever you want with it, right? That's what capitalism is, in a nutshell. So what are the characteristics of that? Well, you have to have private property. You have to believe in capital accumulation and in wage labor, meaning if you go get a job, you expect to be paid. Some people expect to be paid for not doing a job. That's not capitalism. It's the other that we're going to be talking about. A voluntary exchange, meaning when you give people money for something, it's voluntary on both sides. Sometimes you say, I bought that car, and I got totally ripped off. Well, it was voluntary. Nobody held a gun to your head. If you got ripped off, it's your own stinking fault. So that's part of capitalism, is we all have free choice to make decisions. There's a price system. Everything has a price, which means that from point A to point Z, you can determine if something has grown, if something has shrunk. I mean, this is what it's like in the markets. You look at the Dow. Over time, it's gone up, and it's gone up a lot since Trump became president. It's because he believes in these free markets. He believes in America. He was going to make America great again, right? Well, how did he do that? Well, he said, enough is enough. Sick and tired of what previous presidents have done, and basically had a super strong dollar, which that sounds good, right? Well, when you have a really strong dollar, what does it mean? It means that all other currencies are cheaper. And so we're buying exports. The exports that leave America are more expensive everywhere else. The imports coming in are crazy cheap. So since Clinton, we've had a strong dollar. So that's a lot of presidents in there, right? It's Clinton, Bush, it's Obama. It's about 25 years of a strong dollar where imports coming in have been cheap. So what have we then been exporting? Jobs. When we buy other countries' stuff, we're exporting jobs because the jobs will follow manufacturing. And so Trump said, enough is enough already. I'm going to make America great again. How am I going to do that? With monetary policy and bring jobs back to America by making American goods cheaper everywhere else and foreign goods coming in more expensive. What do you think is behind some of these tariffs that we're seeing? Make foreign goods more expensive coming in, American goods cheaper elsewhere, and it's working. It's simply working. You wouldn't think that it's working by listening to the news, but seriously, it's working. And he wants to even the playing field. Because Trump is a free market kind of a guy. Having tariffs isn't necessarily free markets, right? It's a price control that's put on there. It's an extra tax. But it's been so off kilter for so long, he said, under my watch, it's going to change. And I just want to make the playing field even again for the first time in a quarter of a century. And it is working. And this is awesome, and John's going to get into a lot of this later. But so you do have competitive markets with capitalism. You've got decision-making on investments that are determined by the owner of those investments, and prices are determined by the markets. See, that's what capitalism is all about. So one of the common core things, if you can have property, is you have the right to own property. So if you knew that you could advance in life, you could own houses, you could own things, you could get wealthy, you could help fund charities, would you work hard to get there? Oh man, this whole room is full of capitalists. Don't let CNN know. Be protests outside. If so, you are a capitalist, right? So one of the core beliefs in capitalism is simply the right to own property. It's an unalienable right. In the Declaration of Independence, paragraph 2, the Declaration states this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. It's an unalienable right to own property. So when a country now, let's change gears a little bit, does not believe in the right to own property and that people are there for the government rather than the government being there for the people, it creates a nation where people are working not for themselves, but for the government. It's kind of like a master of puppets. We're there to do whatever the government wants us to do. And that's not how we were created. We were created in God's image to be free, to have ownership in things, to be able to make decisions and choices to make the world around us better, to impact the lives of people around us, to have the ability to say, hey, everybody out there, you're more important than I am. When you start to think like that, truly, you will impact the world in such a great way that you won't have room enough to contain the blessing that comes from that. So let's look at the opposite of all of this that I've just talked about. The Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels. It was simply a very short, have any of you read it? I did too, because it's short and it's important to know what the enemy thinks. You know, there's other books that I've read too that people say, why in the world would you read that? Has anyone read Rules for Radicals? Okay, good stuff, actually. If we were to utilize it on our side, it's like the things in there, it's like, oh man, boy, if we were to utilize that stuff, we could really make an impact. We're not. So let's look at socialism and communism real quick. So communism is the ultimate goal for an advancing socialist state in Marxist-Leninism worldview. So socialism has the goal of the government owning the means of production, the administering of that production, and the controlling of the final distribution. So, and I'm going to get into a story later. I'm not going to say it right now. But we've got, what? The government tried to own banks, right? Tried to own the auto industry. Tries to own health care. Oh my word. A lot of the policies of the left are full-on socialists. Moving towards the ultimate goal of communism, which is a political and economic ideology that is based on communal ownership and the absence of all classes, meaning everybody is the same. So let's look at the 10 planks of communism, okay? And some of these, the left isn't really talking about, but most of them, they are, and we're going to go over that. So number one is abolition of private property and land and application of all rents and land to the public purpose. So how do I explain what that means in simple terms? Eminent domain, property taxes. So you can think, I own my home. I've paid it off. I don't have a mortgage anymore. It's like, really? That might be true, but what happens if you don't pay your property taxes? You get a tax lien. You could lose your house even if you paid for it. See, the whole system that we have with property taxes is a communist idea. You don't really own it, even when you own it. So once you own your property outright by paying off your mortgage, you still don't technically own it because the government could jack up property taxes so high that it makes it unaffordable to simply remain. How about a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax? That's plank number 2 of the Communist Manifesto. So marginal tax rates increasing as income goes up is a graduated income tax. So this is in opposition to a more fair tax like a national sales tax or flat tax with no loopholes, where a person is not taxed at a higher rate the more income that they earn. So what are some proposals from the left? Well, 70%. AOC, Sanders, most of them have proposed to have 70% be the highest income tax bracket. Okay, well that's terrible. It's like, well, how in the world? It's like, it was that when Carter was president. See, I was really young then, but a lot of you might remember, it's like, oh yeah, it was high until Reagan came in and fixed things. So there's problems with what they are saying. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. See, in the US, these can be seen as estate taxes, like the death tax, right? So proposals from the left, from Elizabeth Warren, a wealth tax. 2 to 3% per year levied on high net worth individuals of your total estate size. So what if you're worth, I don't know, $100 million or $1 million, whatever it's worth. Imagine having to pay 2 to 3% a year just based on what you're worth. That's what she wants to do. Bernie Sanders wants an estate tax of 77%. It means everything you worked your whole life to accumulate, and you're thinking, I'm going to pass this on to my kids and grandkids. Well, you can pass it on, well, 23% of it, because the rest the government wants to keep under their proposal. So this is some pretty sick stuff. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Again, that could be eminent domain, it could be property taxes. Again, I don't know. This is one that's kind of like a little bit, it's not really applicable right now because there isn't any laws that I could find that are pertaining to this, but could be there. It doesn't say that it is one of the planks of communism. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Okay, this one's really easy, especially for me being an economist. So the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 created the Federal Reserve. And now the government owns many of the country's largest banks via bailout money. So government control of private industry is just a polite way of saying fascism. So fascism is not communism, however, there are many common threads between them. So what are some of the proposals of the left that go to this number 5 plank of communism? Okay, the Green New Deal from AOC and others. How is the Federal Reserve talked about in the Green New Deal? Well, by their answers. When somebody has asked them, numerous news people have asked AOC and others who are proponents of the stupid Green New Deal, it's like, how are you going to pay for it? Okay, so here's the answers that I've seen on the news. Well, we'll just print money. That is what they do now, but they're going to have to put the poor printing press on steroids and whatever. So Stephanie Kelton of Stony Brook University, she's one of the architects behind the Green New Deal and the economic side of it. So she said deficit is not a bad thing if we're under a natural speed limit. So keep building a deficit, as long as you don't do it too much, it's going to be okay. So they also just redirect the question, i.e. don't answer it. So like this is an answer that they've given. Well, when Congress funnels trillions to the military or cuts taxes on the wealthy, nobody asks how they'll pay for that. So that wasn't the question. How are you going to pay for your stupid thing? So they redirect the question, never answer it. How about this one? Climate change costs are going to be more expensive than actually paying for it. Assuming that the earth was actually warming up, sure. It's not, oh my word. They're living in this la-la land, world of unreality. Or you just simply raise taxes. A carbon tax, raise the marginal and corporate tax rates. They want to have a carbon tax on every living creature because they're pollutants. See, they don't know how they're going to pay for it. Printing money is the only legit answer on there, and that's not a good answer. Everything else, they just stop answering the question and they redirect it or do something silly. So, centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. So you've got the FAA, the FCC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. They're all government entities that propose to regulate how we travel and what is said. So there's nothing particularly disturbing about this now, but what about in the future? Could the government shut down communication or transportation for various people groups? Sure they could. Remember the hush-rush law? when Clinton wanted to tell Rush to pipe down, and they were going to say, oh, no conservative people on the radio can talk bad about any liberal. This stuff is in the works. So there's no competition there. There's no free market, private entity as a choice. See, I thought that the government made monopolies illegal. Oh, that's right, they did, except for where they have a monopoly, right? So what are some proposals from the left? The Green New Deal again, sadly this dumb thing keeps coming up because it's purely a communist plan. So banning gas and diesel sales by 2030. See, that has to do with transportation, right? Centralization of transportation. If you ban gas and diesel sales, how are people going to get around? How are people going to fly? What happens to the farmers? They don't have electric vehicles for planes yet. Most people just went in hot air balloons. Oh wait, that takes gas too. I don't know. So figure out what to do with heavy transport and aviation. They haven't figured that piece out. So there's a lot of holes in this stupid plan. Number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, and bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil, generally in accordance with a common plan. Okay, that's a lot of words. But relatively recent events have made this one actually kind of disturbing. Obama in 2011 signed into law Executive Order 13575, which the intent was to seize greater power over food, fiber, and energy. It's still in effect. So what are some proposals from the left on this? Well, the Green New Deal, again, they want to decarbonize the entire economy in 10 years. The entire economy. All means all. So they want to retrofit all buildings to zero carbon standards. Every single building in America. It's like, this is where even leftist commentators on the news on CNN and MSNBC said, how are you going to pay for that? Oh, we'll just print money because that's what's always been done. It's like, oh my, it's so stupid. It really is so stupid. So equal obligation of all to work and the establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. So this is kind of sad, but because of high inflation and higher taxes in society, it's been a thrust into a dual income family at the minimum. You know, so in many instances, both husband and wife have to have multiple jobs just to survive. So this is a byproduct of plank number 5, which is centralized credit by the means of a national bank. When they print money without discretion, causes inflation, causes more families to have to work and have multiple jobs, so the kids are left at home with nothing. Now, some people do this by choice, and that's fine. You know, if they want to have multiple jobs. But wanting to and having to are two different stories. So what are some proposals from the left? Well, the Green New Deal, again, says federal jobs guarantee. Anybody who wants a job with the government gets one, and we'll pay them $15 an hour. Well, what if they have no job skills? It doesn't matter. You get a job for $15 an hour. That's ridiculous. And so many of you who have seen me speak before have seen this chart because it's ridiculous. I want to bring it up again. But so the Communist Manifesto has a plank, equal obligation of all to work. But I want to add, or not to work. Because these are states where welfare payments are more than a minimum wage job. Seriously, in Hawaii, you can make $60,590 a year by sitting on the beach, drinking a Mai Tai, and doing absolutely nothing. So why would there be an incentive to work? There's not, but it doesn't end with Hawaii. In DC, it's $50,820 a year. Massachusetts, it's $50,540. Look at all these states on this list. If you live in one of those states, you can actually make more by doing nothing than actually getting a minimum wage job. So, do we have a problem? Yes. What is the incentive for millennials or Gen Zs to go get a job? There's not. Because they could just play Xbox all day if they wanted to and make $60,000 a year if you're in Hawaii. It's crazy, dumb stuff. So combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country. And so I'm not really truly qualified to answer this one, as I don't really know any of the combination of the two industries. But what we seem to have in this country is the opposite, where they're pulling people into the urban centers because they can control them more. Not disbanding them into out in the fields and rural areas. They want everybody in where they can control the masses. So, but as I started to think about it, it's like, okay, they're not really doing it by moving people around, but how are some proposals from the left dealing with this plank of communism? By redistricting. See, many states are taking this away from the legislature to appointed commissions. Many of the appointed commissions are just a bunch of leftists who say, okay, if we can redistrict, we can get people to vote the way that we want them to. That's how they're dealing with that. Lastly, free education for all children in government schools and abolition of children factory labor in its present form. So That's obvious here. Free education. That's Sanders, AOC, numerous others that we all see in the Democratic debates. They all want free college for everybody. Not just elementary school, high school, but free college. It makes a college degree almost meaningless if everybody can get it. But you know what? Even if it's free, there's going to be tons of people who just simply don't go. Because they don't want to. Why? Because they don't have to do anything to make $60,000 a year. So it's like, oh, these plans are just lame and weird. So what does communism say about religion? Well, atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism and the theory and practice of scientific socialism. That's what Lenin said. So what are some proposals from the left? The Equality Act from Pelosi. Okay, have any of you heard of this Equality Act? Okay, I'm going to just kind of explain it a little bit. This is insidious. So right now, religious freedom kind of rules the roost, right? So people, if you're Muslim, if you're Buddhist, if you're Christian, if whatever you are, religious freedom is the trump card. Under this Equality Act, it no longer is. It takes a secondary position to a nice equality. You know, we all want to be equal, right? This is all about SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identification. So therefore, to me, sexual orientation, choosing if you want to be gay or straight, has been around since the beginning of time. It's nothing new. To me, it's just that's a choice. Like we could make a choice to rob a bank. We could make a choice to do something good. It's a choice. Gender identification, to me, is the biggest slap in the face to God ever. Because what they're saying is, you know what, God? I was born with female parts, but I identify as a boy. You messed up. We're created in God's image. And people are saying, you messed up, God. I'm not really a girl. I'm a guy. So we've got problems here moving forward. We've got big problems. And this Equality Act says, hey, all employers, now equality, gender identification issue is the trump card if this thing passes. No longer religious freedom. Which says pastors can no longer talk about those issues from the pulpit. Because religious freedom is secondary to gender identification issues. So if you knew that you could never really advance, and no matter how hard you worked, you could never achieve your dreams, would you work hard? Probably not. See, this was why generally Marxist-Leninist societies rule by fear. Fear of losing your life, your possessions, or even your family if you don't comply. See, that's not fun. Imagine having to live a life in constant fear. That's what that society will bring. So what is the appeal then of communism? All we talked about is all this horrible stuff. So what's the appeal? Well, there's no rich and poor, as everyone's the same. It creates equality. We focus on a group of collective value being greater than unique value, and dignity as individual is given in other worldviews. Boy, sounds like a beautiful utopia, right? That is very appealing to the college masses. It really is, for some stupid reason, because they don't really want to work. And say, if you don't want to work, how about if we're all equal? I don't want somebody who works to be much better than me. So this is one of the problems. But what's the fallacy of all of this? Everyone except for the ruling elite in government is at the same level. Poor. That's what the fallacy is. Everyone is equally poor. There's a knowledge problem. There's no price system. It's impossible for a centrally planned government to determine how much of what good or service should be produced. What's the result? There's either going to be a massive surplus or a massive shortage. The result is a lot of waste and a lot of unhappy people. Either way. So the bottom line, it's an economic philosophy that should never be considered. So choices really do matter. So let's look at this map. Prior to 1948, Korea was a unified nation. North of the 38th parallel became communist North Korea, ruled by fear. They don't value life, property, or religion. Fear of the loss of life, possessions, and family. So what's the result? Second poorest nation in the world. Well, south of the 38th parallel became South Korea, which embraced democratic rule. See, people were given property rights. They were given a hope of a good life. What's the result there? The 14th largest economy in the world. Bottom line, same land mass, same group of people prior to 1948. So what was the difference? A choice. It's a worldview was the difference. Look at this picture. This is a picture of Korea at night. There is absolutely zero lights in North Korea. Look at all the lights in South Korea. That's prosperity right there. Isn't that a crazy picture? It's a very good explanation of the difference between capitalism and communism. Yeah, except there because it's government rule and they're the, yeah. So we have a nation divided. So we went to the Trump inauguration. My wife and I, we got to go with Dr. Dobson, and it was an amazing, amazing trip. So when we were there was protests everywhere, everywhere. And it was the most weird thing. It was like Sodom and Gomorrah. And my kids always hate it when I have to have a teachable moment with them. They always do. It's like, Dad, not again. It's like, just give me some time here. Anyways, I wanted to have a teachable moment with all these stupid protesters at the inauguration. But they didn't want to listen. They wouldn't listen. See, they were protesting Trump is a fascist, Trump is a racist, Trump is Hitler. They were just yelling and foaming at the mouth and doing horrible stuff. And their kids were so vulgar. It's because the parents were vulgar. It's like, oh my word, what have we become? So there's this boiling pot of hatred just right under the surface in this country. This isn't something that Trump created. It's something that Trump inherited because it was there on the inauguration day. He didn't create that. So in 1776, it got me thinking. 1776, there were two revolutions that year. The French Revolution and the American Revolution. The American Revolution was a revolution based on God and religious freedom and the freedom of hope for an amazing future. And what was the outcome? The most prosperous nation in the history of the world. What happened in France? That was also a revolution based on freedom. It was the peasants' uprising trying to go against the upper class. They won. The peasants won. Today, France is still a socialist nation. So there is a difference. Choices matter, and America needs what we have. So let me ask you, is this today? 2 Timothy 3, 2-7, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. They are the kind who worm their way into homes and gain control over gullible women, who are loaded down with sins and are swayed by all kinds of evil desires, always learning but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Does this describe kind of where we are today? Yeah, sadly, it really does. So we're at a crossroads here. Will the new American Revolution be a God revolution or an anti-God revolution? Because we have a choice right now with this election coming up in 2020. See, the election matters, and it's up to us. Remember all the policies we just discussed coming from the left, how they're full-on communist, Marxist-Leninism? Most of them comply with the Communist Manifesto. So what's next? It's truly up to the church at this point. It's up to the church. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, and turn their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. It's an amazing promise from God whose word never returns void. See, so what does that mean? It means when Christians vote, good things happen. He will heal our land when we repent and we turn from our evil ways. So here's some estimates that I got from George Barna. Obama's second term, 30% of registered voters that identified as evangelicals voted. 30%. The result, Obama won. Trump's first term, let's hope the second term is the same. 80% of registered voters that identified as evangelicals voted. See, they were empowered. They got out to vote. Result, Trump won. So what's next at this point? Truly, when the church wakes up, we can make a huge, significant difference. So let's do it. And so here's a blueprint for success, and then I'm done. Conservatives can't win in some states, so don't even try. Seriously. New York, California, Massachusetts, don't waste any money there. So focus on the swing states. Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, and Georgia. So what do you focus on then? If the swing states win the election, what should we focus on there? Focus on the evangelicals. You don't have to focus on everybody, it's too expensive. Focus on the evangelicals, because if they get out to vote, we pretty much know how they're going to vote. So get out get out the vote campaigns at churches, right? These are strategies that we can use moving forward. Run ads on Christian radio and television stations. Okay, here's kind of a cool idea. There's a lot of single issue voters out there, mostly in the pro-life camp, right? But there's other single issue voters too. So if they go to vote for a cause that they're passionate about, they'll probably check the box for president while they're there. So let's work on getting ballot initiatives in these swing states on some of these single issue voter that we know that the people probably won't go out to vote unless there's something really passionate about. And as long as they're there, chances are they're going to check the box for president. So let's work on that as grassroots level. Let's try to get some ballot initiatives on some of these single issue voter type items that will get people out to vote who normally don't care about politics, but they care about life or they care about something else. So we can make a difference. The problem in this world is not the presence of darkness. There's always been darkness. It's the absence of light. So let's be a light in this dark world. Let's be a light. Let's make a difference. This election is a huge deal. And like I said a couple of times in there, this is what the world could look like. What John's going to talk about is what America will look like when we get out and do something amazing and just be active. Compassion without action is meaningless. So let's make a difference. Thanks for all for listening.